What's good, YouTube? It's K.D.M Sports. Today I'd like to share my opinion on this popular debate. Are boxers today better than the boxers of old? This is a very difficult question to answer because in my opinion, I don't necessarily think boxers today are better. Boxing is a sport that's been around for thousands of years and has gone through so many changes, especially rule set wise. Yes, boxing has always been a pugilistic sport, but boxing today is actually a different sport than boxing back in the old days. And that specifically comes down to the rules. When you change the rules in a combat sport, it can drastically change the outcome of fights. Yeah, athletes have evolved, but not to a drastic extent, and mostly due to what we put in our bodies today regarding diet, which would result in why humans have more size. Now, so if old school boxers were to fight in today's day and age, they would probably be fighting in different weight classes. When we look at old fighters, we see that yes, it is boxing, and they are doing something similar, but it's not quite the same. The tactics were different. Boxing, in my opinion, was rougher. There was a lot more clinch fighting and dirty boxing allowed back in those days, as well as boxers being allowed to stand over their fallen opponent and wait for their opponent to get back up so they could line them up and knock them right back down. There was no going back to the corner and waiting for your opponent to get back up. If you look back at Jack Johnson's fights and Jack Dempsey fights, you'll see this was the trend back then. In modern boxing, you can't prey on your opponent like that. Modern boxers can fight in the clinch and dirty box, but more stand-up grappling techniques was involved back in the days. Not saying it was allowed, but they definitely got away with it more. One thing I can say is boxers appear to be more polished skill-wise in modern times, partly due to the fact that the equipment has become more advanced. The boxing gloves have went through many changes and the boxing shoes today are better, so visually it looks more appealing. I think it's more of a natural progression of the sport. New techniques will start to emerge and modern boxers are more polished in the punching aspect. I can agree with that. Footwork is more fluid, most likely due to the shoe wear. I don't think humans biologically have evolved that much over the last 120 plus years. Modern boxing is just much cleaner now with new rule sets and equipment. Technology wise, the only real big advantage boxers have is the access to footage. Back in those days, in the old days, you had to most likely be super rich, or if there was footage, it would be really low quality footage, grainy in resolution, etc. In terms of training methods, I don't see much difference. Boxers still skip rope, they still hit the heavy bag, road work, sparring, etc. Boxing is generally more calisthenics. The fundamental aspects of boxing, the main objectives as a pugilistic sport, haven't really changed much. In my conclusion, I'd say modern boxing and old school boxing are not the same sports. One was more brutal, the other is a more cleaner and a more polished sport in my opinion. In other sports, you can see how certain factors can change things, even in track and field. The footwear runners use today are much different than footwear 100 years ago for track athletes. It helps to contribute to records being broken. If we were to plot modern boxers into those old school eras within their rule sets, you would most likely see tricks being implemented that could affect a modern boxer's effectiveness. Clinching, positioning, fighting on the inside is where I feel a lot of those old school boxers had much more effectiveness and proficiency. Action would literally only be stopped if there was no action. Holding and hitting was much more prominent, and of course the gloves were much smaller and little to no padding. There were way more rounds as well, and aggression and killer instinct was probably more of a thing back then too, because you could prey on a downed opponent, wait for him to get back up while he's still hurt and dazed and just pounce on him. I would say modern boxing has come a long way, and definitely has become more scientific, more of a sport. I think some of us tend to disrespect modern boxing because we see old-time boxers as tougher, more rugged, more character, heart, and will. Basically, we view them as gladiators, and we romanticize with that. This is all true in my opinion, and that's due to the times that those athletes were brought up in. Two different times throughout humanity. It's hard to say if we really became better as a population. Advancements of today make things easier for sure, and you could say that helps to have more knowledge, and in terms of being able to work smarter, kind of like that saying, work smarter and not harder. And I think that's the kind of direction a lot of modern athletes have been going in. Overall, I don't think athletes have gotten better, because certain skills back in the old days, they were more effective with those skills and proficient with. And in today's modern athletes, we're effective and polished with certain techniques and fundamentals. Once you change a rule, it becomes different. And once you change multiple rules, it becomes a completely different sport. We look at something similar, but it's not quite the same, like I mentioned before. And that's how I view modern boxing versus old school boxing. They're not the same sports, but all legends always need to be respected, of course, because without them, we wouldn't know what we know today, and there wouldn't be natural progression of sport. Times have changed and things don't stay the same forever. That's what some of us have to realize. And even me, I'm a huge fan of old school boxers, anybody who knows me, but we do have to view things differently. Thank you guys for listening to me talk and share my thoughts and opinions on another topic. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and if you've got any opinions, leave it in the comment section below.